Whispers of the Attic. It was the summer before my sophomore year of high school when I spent a week at my cousin Dan's house. His family had just moved into this old, creaky Victorian house in a small town about 2 hours away from where I lived. The place looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Peeling white paint, tall, narrow windows, and a tower that loomed over the house like it had secrets it would never share. Dan was always the adventurous one. We were only a year apart, so growing up, we did everything together. This trip was supposed to be fun. We had plans to stay up late, play video games, and maybe even sneak into the woods behind his house at night. But right away, something about that house felt off. You know how some places feel like they're watching you? That was this house. The first couple of days were normal enough, but then strange things started happening. Little things at first. I'd hear faint tapping on my bedroom door late at night, but every time I opened it, no one was there. I tried brushing it off, thinking maybe it was just the house settling. But then Dan said he'd been hearing the same thing, and that's when the unease set in. One night, we decided to explore the attic. It was one of those ideas that seemed good at the time, but in hindsight, it was probably the worst decision we could have made. The attic was accessible through a small door at the end of a narrow hallway on the second floor. Dan's parents had said they hadn't gotten around to cleaning it out yet. They didn't even know what was up there. Old furniture, boxes, random junk. We went up with flashlights, the weak beams cutting through the thick dust in the air. The attic smelled musty, like old wood and decay. There were a few pieces of old furniture draped in white sheets, some boxes stacked against the walls, and in the corner, something strange. A small, wooden rocking horse, just sitting there, untouched by time. Dan was the first to approach it, and he joked about how creepy it looked, but I couldn't even laugh. I was too focused on the heavy feeling in the air, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Let's get out of here," I said, already backing toward the door. But Dan was already opening one of the boxes, his curiosity always getting the better of him. Inside, there were old letters, yellowed with age, some pictures of a family, maybe from the 1920s. As he flipped through them, something caught my eye. There, by the rocking horse, was a small black notebook. It looked like it had been placed there deliberately, not like the other things in the attic, which seemed forgotten and discarded. I picked it up, feeling an immediate sense of dread as I flipped it open. The pages were filled with handwriting, neat at first, but the further I went, the messier it got, until the words were barely legible. "What's it say?" Dan asked, peering over my shoulder. I didn't answer right away because I couldn't make sense of what I was reading. It was a diary, written by a boy who had once lived in this house. At first, it was normal stuff, talking about school, friends, his family. But then the entries started getting darker. He wrote about hearing voices in the walls, about feeling like something was watching him, something that lived in the house. The last entry was the worst. "They won't stop whispering," it read. "They say they want me. They say they're coming for me." I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. "We need to go," I said, but Dan just looked at me, grinning like it was all a joke. He always had this way of not taking things seriously until it was too late. As we made our way back to the door, I heard it, the faintest whisper, like someone was speaking right behind me. I froze, shining my flashlight toward the corner where the rocking horse sat. For a moment, I thought I saw something, a shadow, tall and thin, standing just behind it. "Dan, did you see that?" I whispered, but he just laughed. "Man, you're freaking yourself out." But I wasn't imagining it. I could still hear the whispers, growing louder now, like they were moving toward us. I grabbed Dan's arm and pulled him toward the door. We ran down the stairs, not stopping until we were back in his room, both of us breathing hard. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whispering again. It was louder now, clearer. It sounded like my name, being called over and over. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but the whispering only got louder, more insistent. Then I heard it, the creak of the attic door opening. I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding. The door to Dan's room was closed, but I could hear the soft footsteps on the stairs, coming closer, slowly, deliberately. I shook Dan awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, He groggily listened, and his face paled. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. We both held our breath, waiting. Then, the handle began to turn, slowly, and the door creaked open just a crack. But no one was there. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning finally came, we packed our bags and told his parents we were leaving early. We never went back to that house. A few weeks later, Dan told me he had looked into the history of the house. Apparently, a family had lived there in the 1920s, and their son had gone missing. They said he had run away, but some people believed he had disappeared inside the house, never to be found again. That night, as I was trying to fall asleep back home, I heard it again, the whispering. It was faint, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. I haven't spoken to Dan since,